Israel's decision to halt the transfer of $138 million to the Palestinian Authority. That money is revenue that Israel collects on their behalf and then pays out. The move is right in line with U.S. Congress, who passed similar legislation last year called the Taylor-Force Act. Both are aimed at pressuring the Palestinian government to stop paying out stipends to attackers and their families. But in the West Bank, officials are standing firm that that policy will never change. Here's PLO official Ahmed Majdalani.
This issue is now up to the political level to respond to the decision and to respond by possible means to reject it, because we consider it's a form of piracy. But at the political level, we would like to reassure that we are committed to pay the families of martyrs and prisoners. It's a national, political, and moral commitment.
And today on the Spin Room, this was the focus of debate. Here's a clip. Member of the Fatah Revolutionary Council, Dimitri Diliani, and Dr. Eran Lerman, formerly of Israel's National Security Council. Watch.
You cannot compare issues of disputed territory to acts of murder. They belong to two very different categories, and the Palestinian people should wake up to the fact that the international community after 9/11 no longer tolerates acts of murder of civilians, even if you feel obliged to do this because you don't have other facts.
I'm not here to defend acts of violence. I'm known a nonviolent activist, but I always stress that you cannot justify military occupation, and you cannot equate between an occupying army and freedom fighters that have the right internationally to use whatever method they find proper.
And you can see that full debate and more on the Spin Room today at 4 p.m. Eastern. So, Mohammad, let's talk about what we just heard. The Palestinians have told you time and again, they say it publicly, we are never going to change this so-called pay-for-slay policy, paying out stipends to Palestinian attackers. With this money cut, what kind of impact do you think we'll see in the West Bank?
Many. And according to the Palestinian Authority Prime Minister, Rami al-Hamdallah, he said that the PA may not be able to pay salaries when that happens. And this is extremely concerning, not only to the Palestinian Authority, but I think also to Israel. There are many projects, whether it's part of the health sector or education sector, that may be suspended or stopped, leading even to the security coordination. This may, at some point, Nurit, if it lasts long enough, destabilize the West Bank, destabilize the Palestinian Authority. When you have employees, which we're talking about 150,000 Palestinians who are employed by the Palestinian Authority, if many of those don't get their full salary, month 2 or 3, we may start seeing them go out onto the streets and protesting. And who knows what's going to happen after that.
And Daniel, that does matter to the Israeli government, and specifically the security establishment, because it's not just about politics, it is security.
Absolutely. I spoke to former internal security officers of the Israeli security force, as well as former Israeli military commanders who specialized in the coordination of this area. And one thing that's agreed upon on both sides is that instability will certainly breed a security threat. And that's even said on the Palestinian side, and not because the terror groups there will necessarily try to take advantage of the situation, which is also a concern, but also in regards to what Mohammad was describing, a civil unrest breeding conflict. It's something that happens very often. We were just talking about the Gaza border. The Israeli security establishment is concerned that a similar situation could erupt in the West Bank, and that is certainly something that they will try to prevent. For now, though, the same sources that said that this could unravel also acknowledge that the security coordination between Israel and the Palestinian Authority is strong enough that it seems like it will withstand this sort of development, because both sides have an interest to maintain it.
An important reminder that no matter what happens politically, often it seems, a total collapse politically, but security coordination does still continue. Mohammad, so when it's so important to both sides, do you think this money is going to end up being paid again? Is this just a sort of temporary symbolism?
We've heard this kind of decision and rhetoric in the past from the Israeli cabinet, and nothing really happened on the ground, that the money still was paid after either a month or 2 of suspension. Here's what the Palestinians are telling me, whether it's Dr. Saib Arakat or others within the Palestinian Authority. They're saying that this is just a ploy, this is a campaign issue because of the elections in Israel, that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other Israeli politicians are using this issue of money to persuade or gain in the elections. And once April 9th is over with and the elections are done with, then the Israeli cabinet will probably find a way to continue making payment to the Palestinians. That's assuming that this will happen. But on the other hand, this could not be, maybe it's not a bluff by the Israeli government and they may suspend the money. Then where does the Palestinian Authority go? They cannot continue raising taxes on the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. As it is, they are suffering, the unemployment is high, and they don't really have many natural resources to supplement that. Will they go to the European Union? I'm not sure if that's going to happen. What about the Gulf countries, the wealthy ones, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait? They already make payments. They already, maxed out in terms of what they could pay to the Palestinian Authority, and they may be able to fill the gap for a month or 2 or 3. They need a long-term solution, and they don't know where to go now.
Mohammad, briefly, for viewers who don't understand, why they just don't stop this policy? Because Israel and the U.S. both putting a whole lot of pressure to stop this paying stipends to attackers. Why don't they?
It's a political suicide for any Palestinian official to come out and say that this should stop. But also the Palestinians say that this is a national responsibility, a social responsibility, that these prisoners, these Palestinians who are serving in prison, that the PA or the PLO have a moral, national and social responsibility to pay money to their families so the social fabric continues to be solid and they won't be recruited or they won't go, lead a different style of life.
All right, Mohammad Al-Kassim, Daniel Tsemach.